Hi everyone, I'm Mark from Novation and I'm here today at Bop DJ to check out the brand new Novation SL MkIII. Okay, so let's get a physical overview of the brand new SL MkIII. So here we can see we're using the 49 key version, but of course we do have a 61 key version. So first thing that strikes you immediately is we have our sequencer, which is very similar to those that are familiar with our circuit sequencers or circuit monostation sequencer will feel right at home with the SL. And just above this, we have our 5 really kind of high-res screens. So this is used to get a lot of kind of parameter feedback that we get from the SL. Next to this, we have individual pads that can be used to kind of mute or solo the individual sequences. Just below this, we have our 8 sort of long throw faders, and next to this we have our transport controls. One of the great things about the SL is that you have the ability to use the component software, which will allow you to customize or map certain messages that these pads and faders control. And that's the same for our 8 endless encoders that we have at the top. Next to this, we have a load of kind of feature or function buttons, which we'll be exploring as we kind of go through. And on the rear of it, we have dual MIDI output and also dual CV and gate output for connecting to hardware and modular synths. So at the heart of the SL keyboard here, we have our 16-step sequencer. And in fact, we have 8 individual 16-step sequencers or 8 separate tracks that can be used to trigger external hardware or sequence external hardware. But in this demonstration, we're going to be using Ableton Live as a sound source. And we're going to start off on track 1 here. So the way you would go about setting up your SL is generally in the templates view. So if we hold shift and press templates here, we can actually decide which method of control we want to apply to each of the individual sequences or tracks that we have on the SL. So as you can see, we just have a standard MIDI control set up here for track 1. And we also have the ability to then decide how we want that note information or MIDI signal transferred out of the SL. So for example, we have USB MIDI on, which is sending MIDI straight into Ableton Live. We can decide if we want to send that out of the MIDI DIN 1 or MIDI DIN 2, or perhaps we want to send that out of both. But we're just going to leave that off at the moment. As we say, we're just going into a channel on Ableton Live. So we can just set that up within the templates view on each of the independent tracks or channels that we have. And of course, when you receive the unit, we'll supply you with a stock load of templates, which include some really, really great hardware that's available, including not only sort of Novation Peak and Circuit, but also, Electron Octatrack, Sub 37. So there's a host of different kind of hardware templates straight out of the box. But we're just going to leave that on straight MIDI. As we said, we're using Ableton Live as a sound source. So if we pop back into our sequencer view, we can see that we have a drum rack loaded up on channel 1 here, or track 1, or sequence 1 using the SL. And as I say, we are using it in standalone at the moment. We're just purely using Ableton Live as a sound source. So what we can do is use the sequencer and various different methods just to create a really, really simple sort of 4/4 rhythm. So there's 2 ways you can actually input information into the sequencer. You can either just hit record on the transport and then play that in live, or you can actually sequence the individual notes. So if we just find our kick drum here, we're just going to place that into the sequencer. And it's just really, really quick and easy just to build up certain layers. So we're just going to find our clap there, and we're just going to place that into the sequence as well. And you can notice there that I just simply chose the clap sound and placed it in over the top of the kick drum. We actually have 8 individual parts or 8 polyphony that can be placed onto each individual step. So it's really, really quick and easy just to layer up some sounds. So we're just going to add some more elements in. Just going to find a little kind of hat sound there. And we're also going to show a different way that we can input notes into the sequencer, and that's to play it in live. So if we just find the sound we want and then we just hit record on the transport, we can just play that in over the top. And you notice there, any kind of sloppy playing or anything, the SL automatically quantizes everything into the sequence. So we're just going to really quickly build up some more elements into our drum rhythm. So you can see within seconds there, using both playing elements in live, but also sequence them. It's real quick and easy just to get ideas down into the SL sequencer. So we've got our drum part there. We're just going to move on to track 2 now, where we've kind of got like a bass sound using Ableton Live's analog synthesizer plugin. And one of the really, really neat features that I love about the SL is the ability to use the scales mode, which is really, really powerful. So for example, I'm not a very good keys player, but if I so wish, I can go into the scales mode here and I can actually choose the root note or the key that I want to work in, which will be my root note. So for example, if we choose F, we can also then choose the scale of our choice as well. And there's various different scales here. But for example, we're just going to stay on the natural minor. And then what we can do is decide which elements or parts of the project that we want to actually snap to the scale. So for example, I don't want to use the scale on my drums, because if we obviously pitch the drums, perhaps it'll transpose those notes and then we won't have some of those parts available. So we're not going to select it on the drums, but we'll keep it on for the other parts here, mainly because these will be the melodic parts and we'll obviously want to play those in key as well. There are various different modes for the scale as well. So there's snap, there's filter, and there's display only. Snap is really, really neat, especially for me as I'm not a keys player. What I'll actually do is if I miss any of the notes, it'll actually snap them to the next note within the scale to make sure that I'm always playing in scale. So once we go back into the sequencer, we can actually then turn on the scale mode. And you'll notice with the SL, we've got on our key bed, we have illuminated backlit LED color feedback. So what we can do here is we can actually then snap the scale on. So if we hold shift, press the scale mode, you'll notice that then it illuminates the key bed into the scale. So now if I play anything, it's all within scale as well. Just one thing on the key bed as well, actually. These are semi-weighted synth action key bed with our highest scan rate that we have in our controller keyboard range. So for expressive players, it really tracks your movements as well. So what we're going to do is just kind of octave down for a bass line and just find a couple of notes here that we can then place into the sequence. And there we have a simple bass line placed into the sequencer. Now, one of the really good things at the moment, we're of course just using a 16-step sequence, but if we go into patterns mode here, we can actually expand or chain patterns and sequences together. So you notice that we have our kind of blue track lane here, we have our yellow one. And if we go down here, we can actually access all of the 8 independent sequences and then play around with the length or chain patterns together. So for example, here, if I wanted to create a different phrase for our bass line, I can actually chain another 16-step sequence to our first one, and that will give us a longer phrase. And then perhaps we can find some additional notes there to get a bit of movement. So really easy just to chain patterns together there. So we have a 32-step sequence essentially, but if we want to, we can extend that out to, say, 8 patterns chained together. And what I'll do is actually give us 128 steps per part or per track that we have. So we'll just keep those 2 chained together, and then we have a bass line. Okay, so if we move on to track 3, we can see we have a nice kind of pad sound here. And again, one of the good things about playing in the scale of our choice is if we can kind of play around and just kind of find, a chord that we want to use. And then when we found that, we can just literally hold that and then place that into the first step on our sequence there. Now, one thing you'll notice is due to the gate length, it'll only actually trigger that on the first step, which is kind of not really what we want. So what we can do here is actually jump into the options for each of the sequences and play around with things like the velocity, the gate, and the pattern length as well. So if we move to gate here, what we can do is actually extend this chord that we've got and just hold it down over the entire sequence. So if we just go to step 1 here, and we're just going to increase this to the full 16 steps, just using the encoder above. So that's now held down for the entirety of that sequence. In addition to gate, we obviously have velocity, where we can control the velocity of each of the hits on any of the steps that we choose. And we also have pattern behavior as well. So some really neat things that we can do is we can actually change the start position of the sequence, and we can also change the end position as well. As well as that, we have direction as well. So we can change the pattern direction to forward. We can also change the pattern behavior backwards. Can have a ping pong effect, so it'll go forwards then backwards. But also random is really, really cool to get some kind of, some kind of happy accident movements going on within your sequence. So it'll actually pick random notes within that sequence. And don't forget, obviously, we have 8 independent sequences as well. So any of these tracks can be doing a completely different pattern direction to another one. So that's really, really powerful in terms of the sequencer. Okay, so moving on to track number 4 here, we have this kind of lead sound as well. And one of the really, really powerful things on the SL we have is the ARP section as well. So we can turn the ARP on by holding Shift and then ARP on. But also we can press the ARP button and we can actually jump into the ARP settings as well. For example, the 16 pads that we have can be used to create or take out parts of the arpeggiator. So we can actually create our own kind of rhythms. So a really, really neat way of just getting completely different rhythms with your ARP. As well as this, we have various different settings as well for the ARP. So for example, we can change like the octave range. We can also change the velocity, so it's kind of played. We can also change the sync rate. And we can also change the type as well. So we can change it from up to up and down. We can also just go straight down. Or we can have it completely random as well. So there's many, many different ways of customizing the arpeggiator with the SL. What we're going to do is just jump back to sequencer now and then just place this into our track. So there we can see it's really, really quick and easy, just using the 8 completely independent sequences just to really build up some of the percussive elements and melodic elements to a track. So another really, really good feature of the SL is the ability to split the keyboard into zones. So if we hold Shift and turn zones on, there you can see that the 4 tracks that I've actually been building up and playing with throughout this demonstration are actually now split across the keyboard. So for example, we have, kind of like our drum sounds here, our bass, our pads, and then our lead there as well. And notice that all the parts that we've selected that we want to be in scale are still in scale as well. So this view is really handy, obviously from a performance aspect, but as well from, just really quickly getting your ideas going. So I could essentially just hit record here and actually play the parts from here. And then what that'll do is actually then record them into all of their individual sequences on the SL as well. So of course, we've been using the SL in completely standalone, so it doesn't have to be connected to software to make it work. But we are using Ableton Live as a sound source. And one of the really, really good things about the SL is the ability to use In Control. So In Control is essentially software control mode. There is an amazing script for Ableton Live, but it also works with Logic and introduces Huey as well. So you can use it with, say, Cubase and other DAWs as well. So with In Control, what we can actually do is select any of these parts that we've been using. As we say, we've been using a drum rack in Ableton. We've been using the analog plug-in synth from Live as well. And we can actually press any of the tracks here, and you notice that we get instant parameter control using the encoders at the top. So this is really, really good. And also, as well as just your straight 8 parameter controls, for any of the devices that have more than those 8 parameters or go-to parameters, we actually get different banks. So we can scroll through not just those 8 parameters, but all of the parameters that we have available with that device in Ableton Live. And for those that are familiar with our Launchpad range, will notice that the 16 steps, or the sequencer that we've been using, has now turned into a full-blown Launchpad. So we can launch and trigger clips and scenes as well, and have full control and movement over our project within Ableton Live. Up on the top here with the pads at the top, we have mutes and solos. So we can mute individual parts, solo them. We can also pan down here into another bank and have control over monitor and arm as well. So there we have a look at the brand new SL MkIII from Novation. For more information, please check out the Bop DJ website or pop into your local store at Leeds, Manchester and Bristol. Thanks for watching.